Revenge with Karen.
I knew something was off the day the intern asked if Maya was still working here or just squatting for fun. I laughed at first because it's Maya, right? Quiet as a church mouse on Sunday morning, always sipping that same off-brand chamomile like it's a religion. But then I glanced at her cubicle. Tower of manila folders like a paper fortress. Printer blinking low toner like it was crying for help. And her, just calmly feeding the tray. Page after page. Not frantic, not rushed, just methodical. Like she was building something, or sealing something in. Maya's been in that back corner of finance for as long as I've been eating cafeteria chicken on Thursdays. She never complained, never overshared on Slack, didn't gossip or join the group chats where people moan about expense reports or HR's latest mental wellness bingo. She was just there, buried in documentation prep, whispering to herself in spreadsheet formulas and scanned dates. People joked she was part of the building. Hell, some said the printer was her emotional support animal. What no one asked was why she printed so much, or why every folder she handed in was cross-referenced, color-tabbed, and bound tighter than legal's NDA vault. And no, this isn't another found a burner phone behind the break room microwave story. Won't hear about secret affairs or bathroom blow-ups here. This is the quiet kind of fuse, the kind that hums behind the drywall, gathering heat. So hey, before we go further, quick favor. If you're into stories where the underdog doesn't bark but documents everything, hit that like and subscribe. It keeps the printer toner flowing over here and lets us keep digging up stories HR would rather bury. Anyway, Maya, only time she looked up from her desk was to fix the shared copier. IT never touched it. Facilities didn't bother. But if a tray jammed, Maya had a hairpin, a paperclip, and exactly the right curse words in a whisper tone to get it running again. No one trained her on that. She just watched, listened, learned. It was eerie how good she was at patterns. You'd think someone that precise would have been promoted, but she wasn't flashy. Never asked for more, never networked. People like Liz, the new HR manager, saw that as weakness. Liz came in all neon blazers and buzzwords, throwing around words like streamline and optics like they were grenades. And Maya, she just nodded, took notes, printed more. Every week, a new stack of folders got dropped into internal review. Maya's job was technically audit prep, which most people assumed meant reformatting PDF invoices and making binders. But every so often, she flagged something weird. A travel expense from Miami that matched a vendor payment in Montreal. A bonus structure with no signature trail. A stock grant for a consultant who didn't exist. And every time her notes were clear, possible duplication, recommend further review. Thing is, no one ever reviewed, they filed it away. She didn't argue, just printed 2 copies, one for compliance, one for her personal binder. It was her routine. Come in before sunrise, leave after everyone else. Double print, double check, drink that weird tea that smelled like wet hay. She wasn't hiding. She was waiting. And nobody, not HR, not legal, not even the CFO, thought to ask why Maya had higher security clearance than half the executive assistants. Or why the printer logs showed consistent midnight activity tied to her login. Or why one drawer of her desk had a fireproof lock on it. It was just Maya. Reliable, visible Maya. Until Liz decided to count printer paper. And then the entire office learned the hard way that Maya didn't just print receipts, she delivered them. You've printed 847 pages this month, Maya. That's not just excessive, that's theft. The room went dead quiet. You could hear someone stop chewing a carrot stick across the conference table. Liz, the freshly hired HR manager with the voice of a self-help podcast and the grace of a guillotine, standing at the head of the room, her slides behind her frozen mid-transition. She had that look, the HR gotcha face. Eyebrows arched like twin daggers, voice syrupy but venomous, like she was reading a eulogy she wrote herself. This is a compliance meeting, she added, as if anyone had forgotten why we were all crammed together at 9:15 a.m. with stale muffins and mandatory attendance. And that includes responsible resource use. Maya didn't flinch, didn't blink. She just sat with her hands folded neatly on top of a blue audit ledger, legs crossed at the ankle like she was waiting for a bus, not an ambush. Liz, of course, took the silence as guilt. You were flagged by its supply tracking system, Liz continued, tapping her tablet like it was a weapon. No other employee even crossed 120. But you, 847. That's almost a ream and a half in 2 weeks. Few chuckles rippled down the back row. You know the kind. The hyena laughs from the people who stay out of HR's line of fire by laughing at whoever's burning. Maya's response came slow, soft, like she'd measured it for temperature. Did you check what I printed? The question landed wrong on Liz. You could see it. She expected denial. Tears, maybe, at least an apology. Instead, she got curiosity. Liz narrowed her eyes, recalibrating like a thermostat in a freezer. This isn't about content, Maya, she snapped. It's about misuse of company resources. Maya didn't respond, just stared at her with the patience of someone watching an oil fire inch toward a fireworks factory. To her left, one of the newer accounting guys shifted uncomfortably. You could tell he wanted to say something, probably about how Maya handles all the pre-audit binders, or does half the internal compliance prep no one else touches. One look from Liz's direction, and he clammed up like a bad witness. Effective immediately, Liz declared, with the finality of a game show buzzer, "We are putting a hold on your print access pending further review. I expect an explanation on my desk by end of day." Still no reaction from Maya, just a polite smile that almost seemed pitying. She stood up slowly, gathered her notebook, slid her badge into her front coat pocket with quiet precision. Then she said it. Words I now realize should have set off alarms. I won't be printing anything else today. Not I'm sorry, not I didn't know, just that sentence. Calm, cold, like the end of a chess match. Liz, clearly not used to losing, tried to recover. This isn't personal, Maya, it's policy. Maybe if you focused more on collaboration instead of hiding behind paperwork. Maya stopped walking. Turned just enough to let her voice carry across the room. I wasn't hiding, she said. Eyes level with Liz, I was documenting. And then she walked out. Not stormed, not fled, walked like a surgeon finishing a shift. Nobody spoke, not for a long moment. Then Liz, clearly rattled, forced a weak chuckle and muttered, God, she's dramatic. But you could feel it, something was off. Maya didn't act like someone who got caught. She acted like someone who finished something. And that's when the questions started. Quietly in corners and chat threads. What the hell was Maya printing? Why the hell did she sound so calm? And why did Liz, who'd been here 3 weeks, just fire the one person who actually knew how all our money moved? The printer wasn't the story, not yet. But Maya. Maya had just struck the first match. Liz didn't even give her 5 minutes. Barely an hour after the meeting, she marched into the finance wing with that same air of performative authority, clipboard clutched like a courtroom subpoena, bills hitting the tile like Judgment Day. The interns scattered. Even Tom from payroll looked up from his 3rd microwave quesadilla of the morning. Maya, she announced like she was auditioning for a true crime documentary. Per compliance protocol, I need your badge now. Maya didn't look surprised. She closed the spreadsheet she'd been reviewing, cell formulas mid-calculation, and stood up with the grace of someone exiting a yoga class, not a firing squad. No questions, no panic, just a slow motion that said, finally. She removed her lanyard with one hand and reached under her desk with the other. Out came a matte black envelope, thick, sealed, and labeled in her meticulous handwriting. Print Audit, March to August. It had a green courier slip stapled to the back with a barcode and a pre-printed delivery address. Maya walked past Liz without breaking eye contact. No drama, no explanation. What's this? Liz called after her, squinting at the label. You said you wanted an explanation on your desk. Maya replied without stopping. You'll find it in there. And then she did something that made every neck in the finance department crane like meerkats at a lion sighting. She walked straight down the corridor, past IT, past legal, past facilities, and paused at the janitor's closet where Jerry, the building's longest surviving facilities guy, was wrestling with a vacuum hose and humming to Fleetwood Mac. Maya smiled. Hey, Jerry, he looked up. Mornin', Maya. I just wanted to say thank you for always fixing the printer tray. Even when I jammed it with 67-page binders on a Friday night. Jerry laughed. You always knew how to treat that machine gentle, unlike Kevin from marketing. That guy punches the toner slot like it owes him money. Maya chuckled. You might want to log off early today. Home, take a long lunch. Jerry raised an eyebrow. Why? She just smiled. Trust me. With that, she walked out. By the time Liz got back to her desk, the black envelope was waiting, centered, sealed, silent, like a package from Karma herself. She frowned at the label. Print Audit, March to August. She flipped it over. That green courier slip caught her eye. She read the destination once, then again. Her mouth moved with the words. SEC Regional Enforcement Office. She blinked, then grabbed her phone. Rob, she barked into the receiver. I need someone from legal. Now. But it was already too late. Somewhere across town, a courier had just picked up an identical envelope from Maya's apartment, mail drop, time-stamped, chain of custody logged, in transit. Back in the office, Liz stared at the envelope like it had started ticking. She hadn't just fired a quiet paper pusher. She'd fired the witness. The envelope was heavier than it looked. Liz sliced it open with a letter opener shaped like a flamingo, some desk-warming gift from a past job she wouldn't shut up about, and pulled out a stack of printed reports so thick they sighed when they hit the desk. The first page was a cover sheet. Clean, professional. Internal print log summary, March-August. Below that, a table of contents, 42 items, each one titled like an obituary for corporate ethics. She flipped to the first section, still wearing that HR smirk, the one that says I went to grad school for this. Page 1 was benign enough. Vendor disbursement audit, travel reimbursement crosscheck. But then she saw it. 2 payments, same vendor ID, same date, different bank accounts. She blinked. Page 2, same pattern. Page 3, a side-by-side export of timestamp logs from a travel submission portal. Metadata showed it was submitted at 2:14 p.m., but the security system log showed the employee wasn't even in the building that day. And there, at the bottom of the page, a note in red ink, manual override of timestamp, see system admin credentials attached. Liz sat back in her chair, heartbeat climbing the rungs of her throat like a panic-struck animal. She pulled the next section. Payroll adjustment overrides. Q2 more discrepancies. Executives receiving quarterly bonuses twice, with identical memo lines but different transaction IDs. Maya had cross-referenced manual inputs made through a shadow admin panel, one most of the finance team didn't even know existed. Page after page, the noose tightened. None of it was accusation. It was all evidence, clear, meticulous, annotated in Maya's perfect handwriting. Then came the stock grants. That's when Liz stopped breathing. An allocation listed was issued to a name she didn't recognize. No hire form, no HR record. But the clearance signature, right there, in blue ink, hers, Liz's, she checked it again. The date was from her second week on the job, but she didn't remember signing this, or did she? She'd been pushing through onboarding paperwork like a madwoman. Maybe she missed a line, a header, a forged form the office suddenly felt too bright, the air too thin. She grabbed her phone and speed-dialed legal. "Hello," a bored voice answered. "This is Liz. I need you in my office. Now, it's urgent. What's it about?" She hesitated. "Potential audit exposure." Silence. Then a cold, clipped reply, "We'll be right there." Within minutes, legal was in the room. They barely made it past the first 5 pages before they were calling the CFO. He was at lunch with a private equity guy who always wore sunglasses indoors, hadn't even gotten to his entree when he got the text. He left his plate mid-bite and was back in the building before the sauce cooled. When he saw the document spread across Liz's desk, his jaw locked so tight you could hear it grind. "These weren't just printed," he muttered. "These were prepared." Liz, now visibly sweating, tried to regain footing. "We didn't know she was compiling this." Legal cut her off. "That's not a defense. That's a confession." CFO picked up a report and read a note Maya had added in the footer. Multiple violations unaddressed as of last quarterly filing. Prepared for voluntary disclosure. Voluntary, not internal. Liz suddenly understood. This wasn't an employee making a fuss. This wasn't a personal vendetta. Maya hadn't printed 847 pages to save herself. She printed them to bury the company. And no one, not Liz, not legal, not the guy with private stock options built on falsified numbers, had seen it coming. Because they thought she was invisible. Turns out, Maya didn't need to be seen. She just needed them to read. The IT guy, Raphael, looked like he wanted to melt into his rolling chair and disappear entirely. He'd been summoned to the 11th floor, which was already bad news, but now he was stuck in a room with 3 legal vultures, the CFO and Liz, all staring at him like he'd personally installed the bomb. She used her login credentials to export financial data every night. The lead attorney asked, voice clipped, eyes hard. "Yeah," Raphael said, tugging at his collar. "Between 2:03 and 2:18 a.m. every night like clockwork. Print queue synced, export logs. She had batch scripts set up. Nothing sketchy, nothing we were alerted to anyway." Liz leaned forward, arms folded tight. "Why didn't anyone flag it?" "Because she had elevated clearance," Raphael said flatly. "Her access level was higher than most of legal's, and definitely higher than mine." There was a beat of silence. "Who gave her that clearance?" the CFO asked. Raphael tapped on his tablet and flipped it around. Signed by your office. 8 months ago. Digital signature from the CEO. That dropped like a cinder block. Show me, legal demanded. Raphael pulled up the system logs and zoomed in on the signature trail. There it was, clear as daylight, authorization approval. Maya Rivera, Tier 3 audit clearance. Approved by CEO. She didn't hack anything, Raphael added, his voice quiet. She was working within her role. But she's just a junior analyst, Liz spat, voice cracking. Why would she need that level of access? Across the room, the junior legal intern, Columbia law overachiever they'd only let in meetings to take notes, spoke for the first time. She's listed in the org chart under pre-audit and risk certification. That's a named designation. Which means what? The CFO snapped. The intern hesitated. It means she's technically a disclosure officer, authorized to collect and report high-risk financial anomalies for regulatory compliance. Liz blinked. She's what? The intern cleared her throat. Had a legal obligation to document and report anything that could compromise investor integrity. If she believed there were unresolved financial irregularities, she was empowered, no, required, to escalate. That's when the room changed. It wasn't just panic now, it was realization. A slow, skin-crawling awareness that Maya wasn't some rogue printer addict. She wasn't disgruntled. She wasn't overstepping. She was following protocol. She'd been doing it right under their noses. Every late-night export, every tabbed binder, every copy of every memo, it was all by the book, a book no one else had bothered to read. Suddenly, Liz's whole face deflated. Her voice dropped. We fired a federal disclosure officer. No one answered. Raphael, still holding his tablet like it was radioactive, glanced at his screen and frowned. You guys might want to see this. Turned the display to show an incoming email. Sender, SEC Gov subject line, voluntary disclosure submission Maya Rivera. He tapped it open. Thank you for your thorough submission. We've received the complete documentation packet, including digital audit logs, timestamped reports, and annotated discrepancies. We'll be following up this afternoon with a preliminary questionnaire. Regards, Special Agent Connors, SEC Regional Enforcement. No one moved. One breathed. The CFO rubbed his temples like he could massage away a coming lawsuit. Liz looked like she was about to be sick. She was preparing for something, the intern whispered. We just didn't know what. But Maya had known. For months. While they were gossiping about her printer habits, while Liz was redecorating her office and laying off support staff, while the CFO was backdating performance bonuses for his cronies, Maya had been quietly documenting the rot, not leaking it, not blackmailing, just preparing, like a storm cellar before a tornado. Now the sirens were wailing, and the only person who knew where the emergency exits were was gone. By mid-afternoon, the office air had shifted, not like a storm rolling in, more like oxygen thinning at altitude. Phones rang longer before being answered. Lunch orders were left to sweat on reception desks. Slack channels once clogged with memes and meeting reschedules had gone ghost quiet, except for the DMs. Did you hear about Maya? She was fired? Why? I heard she's a whistleblower. Wait, like federal? By 2:00 p.m., a private Slack thread titled #Printergate had over 50 members. Someone posted a screenshot of the sex confirmation email, redacted poorly enough that Connors and SEC Gov were still clearly visible. Another posted an old message Maya had sent last quarter asking why certain restricted stock grants weren't logged in the internal ledger. No one had responded at the time. Now it looked like a flashing neon warning. The CFO's assistant, Carla, who usually ran on triple-shot espresso and spite, suddenly vanished. Her calendar, once a sea of back-to-back meetings, was wiped clean except for one vague entry, out medical. No details. Just gone. Desk lamp was still on. Her mouse still had the faint warmth of a recent click. Someone from legal whispered to someone in payroll. A memo was quietly issued. Freeze all pending equity disbursements. No explanation. Just a cold pause on everything shiny. By 2:45, the head of compliance was in a private call with outside counsel. We know because the door was closed, and for the first time in years, he pulled the blinds. Total eclipse mode. Liz, still trying to salvage her spine, paced in the corridor outside IT like a ghost on hold. She kept demanding access reinstatement to Maya's files. IT just shook their heads. Her credentials were wiped, Raphael explained again. The second you disabled her badge, her digital footprint was sealed and archived. Sealed where? Liz snapped. Internal vault. Air-gapped. It's locked behind compliance encryption protocols, he replied, not even trying to soften the blow. He had a disclosure designation. Standard protocol triggers once access is revoked. We don't touch it. Legal doesn't touch it. Only the recipient agency can unlock it. Liz looked like someone who just discovered the iceberg had a basement. Across the floor, someone printed out Maya's resignation letter. It had been scheduled to auto-send that afternoon. Clean, one page, no drama, no bitterness, just a sentence near the end that landed like a sledgehammer. I trust the enclosed documentation fulfills my final duty as designated officer. She didn't threaten. She didn't accuse. She completed. That's what terrified them. She hadn't demanded anything. Hadn't warned anyone. No calls to HR. No late-night emails. Just months of quiet data gathering and then silence. And now that silence was deafening. Because silence meant Maya was still out there. Knowledge, with receipts, with motive unknown. Was she seeking justice? Revenge? Immunity? No one knew, and that made her dangerous. By 3:15, legal was in full scramble mode. Documents were being printed like the floor was on fire. Emails were flagged for deletion. Conversations happened only behind closed doors or in hallway whispers. Someone tried to locate Maya's personal laptop through IT. We're told it had been powered down remotely and couldn't be pinged. She was a digital ghost now. No traceable IPs, no logins, no online footprint, just the 847 pages, the ones Liz had mocked, the ones now sitting in a FedEx lockbox somewhere between their office and the SEC's front door. This wasn't a mutiny. It was an execution. And Maya hadn't pulled the trigger. She just built the gallows, printed the blueprints, quietly left the door unlocked. The file finally surfaced late in the day. Tucked away in a forgotten SharePoint folder misnamed Q1 Backup, MISC HR. A compliance associate, Marcia, who'd aged 5 years in 5 hours, found it while digging through old onboarding records like a prospector looking for a nugget that might save them from indictment. It was Maya's original hiring packet. Resume was unremarkable at first glance. A forensic accounting degree from a second-tier school, a stint in municipal records, 3 years at an NGO no one had ever heard of. But stapled to the back of her offer letter was a 1-page addendum signed by the CEO and someone from regulatory affairs, long since laid off. In dry legalese, it outlined a secondary designation. Employee is to be classified as named disclosure officer, NDO per compliance policy subsection 3.7. NDO may operate independently to collect, document, and report discrepancies in financial governance as required under federal voluntary disclosure guidelines. Below that, a signature. The CEO's, stamped, dated 8 months prior. And just like that, the dominoes weren't just falling, they were collapsing. She hadn't overstepped, hadn't printed anything she wasn't allowed to. She was mandated to. Marcia took the paper to legal. Within 30 seconds, 4 department heads were in the war room, staring at the document like it had fangs. Liz was called in. She looked like a peeled onion by then, pale, slick with sweat, layers of her authority stripped back by the hour. The chief legal officer read the addendum twice, each time slower than the last. She was covered, he muttered. Every report, every download, every printed page, it was within scope. Liz's voice cracked. We fired her, in front of the entire department. For printer usage, the room was silent. Then the intern, yes, the same intern from earlier, let it slip. We just fired a federal informant. Everyone turned to look at her. She shrugged helplessly. That's what she was, right? An NDO is effectively a sanctioned whistleblower. The moment she triggered the disclosure protocol, it was operating under federal protection. More silence, heavy, terrible. The CFO dropped into a chair like gravity had doubled. We're done. He wasn't wrong. Because if Maya was acting under compliance protection, and that had been signed off by the CEO, it meant everything she'd submitted to the SEC was now legally insulated. Chain of custody, audit logs, clearance authority, all intact. And then Marcia, poor sweet Marcia, pulled out a final page. It was the last sheet in Maya's printing queue. Plain white paper. No fancy formatting. Just centered, bold text at the top. Voluntary Disclosure Form 8K Addendum. Underneath, typed cleanly, this document accompanies previously submitted evidence regarding executive compensation discrepancies, unreported equity allocations, and timestamp manipulation. I certify this submission is accurate and complete to the best of my knowledge. Signed, Maya Rivera. And D.O., the room didn't breathe. No one had to say it, but the truth was nuclear. They hadn't just embarrassed themselves. They'd interfered with a protected disclosure. And now the SEC was coming, already had the files, already sent a response, probably already en route. Outside the room, the usual late afternoon buzz had turned funereal. People packed up early with strange, hushed energy, like passengers trying not to make eye contact with the captain while the ship listed sideways. Liz tried one last Hail Mary. Can we argue she misrepresented herself? But the legal officer was already shaking his head. No, her title wasn't for public display. Disclosure officers operate in the background, that's the point. He tapped the document once, gently, like it might explode. She was never invisible, he said. She was embedded. At exactly 3:45 p.m., Raphael from IT looked up from his screen and said, to no one in particular, you guys are going to want to see this. He spun his monitor around. An internal alert had just pinged every department lead with the subject line. SEC unannounced audit. On-site review to begin 6:00 p.m. Below it, a single sentence. Per submission received under disclosure code 77C8K, our office will be conducting an immediate site review of financial records, data infrastructure, and compliance logs. Please make accommodations accordingly. Within 60 seconds, legal's hallway became a freeway. Doors opened and slammed. Whiteboards were erased like crime scenes being wiped. Someone in finance threw their lunch in the trash, still wrapped. The printer jammed. No one fixed it. Liz, still seated in the HR pod like the walls might protect her, refreshed her Slack. Nothing. She blinked, refreshed again. Still nothing. Her direct messages gone. Her access to #HR admin, #benefits comms, and #onboarding Slackbot revoked. She stood up, walked to her laptop, and tried to log into the admin dashboard. Access denied. Then her phone buzzed. One notification, your Slack workspace permissions have been modified. She stared at it, numb. As if someone had reached into her purse, removed her ID, handed her back a blank card. At 4:02 p.m., the CEO issued a company-wide statement. In light of recent developments, we are cooperating fully with regulatory agencies to ensure our commitment to transparency and compliance. We are taking these matters seriously, and thank you for your professionalism during this process. There was no mention of Maya, no mention of the documents, just developments. This was a weather report and not a corporate implosion. Meanwhile, across town, in a federal building with no name on the door, Maya sat in a neutral-toned conference room, face calm, posture perfect. The walls were off-white, the clock made no sound, and her tea sat untouched beside a brown leather folder. An SEC agent entered, mid-40s, dark tie, no smile. He slid into the seat across from her and placed her printed packet on the table. Miss Rivera. She nodded. Thank you for coming in person. Most submissions don't. She offered a small, professional smile, then reached into her bag and slid her old company badge across the table. Thought you might need that, she said. The agent raised an eyebrow. Still functional, until they revoke it. Probably won't realize for another hour or so. He tapped the badge, then set it aside. Would you be willing to walk us through the primary files? Maya leaned forward and opened her folder. Color-coded, sequential. She didn't look smug, didn't gloat. She simply did what she'd always done, methodically, quietly, and with complete precision. Of course, she said. I kept notes on internal authorization, cross-checked the timestamp manipulations, and included original PDFs for verification. The payroll data is in Appendix B. Cross-reference those with the vendor account summary and the equity allocations file. You'll see the discrepancies. The agent nodded, flipping to the page. And for the first time since she walked out of that building, Meyer exhaled. She didn't want a parade. She didn't want a headline. She wanted integrity, the kind no one noticed until it was too late to fake. Back at the office, people whispered her name like it was a ghost. Where was she? Why hadn't she spoken? Would she come back? But Maya wasn't planning a return. She was already where she needed to be, not in vengeance, not in rage, just in the one place where the truth still had jurisdiction. And she was ready to testify. 6:12 p.m. The elevator dinged, and the air changed like someone had just cracked open a pressure seal. 2 SEC agents stepped out, one in a dark suit holding a rolling briefcase, the other with a slim tablet already awake in his hand. They didn't introduce themselves beyond badges and first names. They didn't ask where to sit. They told the receptionist where the staging area would be. Within 5 minutes, they were unpacked in conference room C, where, just this morning, Someone was leading a mandatory wellness workshop on the benefits of posture-correcting chairs. Now the only thing being corrected was the company's lifespan. Legal arrived first. The general counsel looked like he'd been sucking air out of a balloon all afternoon, puffed, pale, wide-eyed. SEC lead agent greeted him with a neutral nod and tapped his screen. "Let's begin with an adjusted stock issuance dated April 14th, he said calmly. Issued to a Miss Whitney Carson. The room flinched. Whitney was the CEO's daughter. Nominally, a strategic consultant who showed up once every fiscal quarter in a trench coat and left behind pastel post-its with vague motivational quotes on them. Her equity deal had been fast-tracked, hush-hush, outside of standard protocol. And now it was page 1. The SEC agent continued, scrolling without looking up. This record reflects a bypass of standard approvals. However, we found one clearance signature on the internal HR form. It's dated 2 days after Miss Carson was onboarded. He tapped again. The screen rotated to show a scan form. At the bottom, a digital signature. Liz Brenner, Director, Human Resources. Blood drained from Liz's face so fast she looked embalmed. I didn't authorize that, she croaked. I signed 30 onboarding forms that day. I didn't. But the agent wasn't listening. He was reading aloud from his screen again. This form was accompanied by an internal email with metadata showing timestamp edits. That trail was cross-referenced with an employee activity log compiled by your former disclosure officer, Maya Rivera. Legal tried to interrupt. Agent kept reading. According to the audit trail, Miss Rivera submitted her resignation letter 2 days before your HR department terminated her. He paused, and this time he did look up. Care to explain that timing? No one answered. He slid a USB across the table. Included in her resignation packet was a complete print history, page by page. We've verified its accuracy. The lawyer picked it up with tweezers in his brain. Document on screen flicked over to the footer of the file. A final note. You asked about the 847 pages. I gave you exactly what you needed. The room froze, not with panic, but with understanding. The printer hadn't been the crime, it was the trigger. A quiet little blinking box in the corner of the finance wing that had for months been spitting out evidence. Not for backup, not for records, for war. No one spoke. Not the CEO, who had arrived moments earlier and now stood silently behind his attorney, face the color of printer paper. Not Liz, who stared at her name under Whitney Carson's signature like it might vanish if she blinked hard enough. Not Legal, who had run out of spin. Because the damage was already done. The documents were sealed. The audit had begun. The packet had landed, and Maya, she wasn't coming back. She'd been dismissed for printing paper. But really, she'd printed consequences. Now the paper was gone, but the silence she left behind, that would echo for years. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.